I was 14 years old when my friend Mark and I had a sleepover. Our parents were cool and let us sleep over on some weekends. We would have the best nights, staying up until well into the morning, stuffing our faces with junk food and playing video games until our eyes were red. One weekend, his dad left for a business trip Friday evening and was supposed to be back by the morning. Mark and I never really got into trouble, so I guess his dad thought it would be okay to leave us alone for a few hours. He ran us through the usual routine. Don't talk to strangers, keep the place tidy, and don't let anybody into the house. He would always say he has his own key, so don't even open the door for him. I settled into the couch and was setting up for a scary movie marathon, while Mark was getting the snacks. Some of the movies were really good, but some were straight up laughable. I watched until about 1 in the morning when we started drifting in and out of sleep. During one of the times, I was half asleep, and I could have sworn I heard the door handle pulling. I couldn't really tell if I was dreaming or actually heard it though. I started to figure, maybe I was just being paranoid from the movies, maybe I was hearing things. I decided to ignore it and was about to go to sleep when I heard it again. And then it started to creep me out, so I stayed up for a while, just for a little longer to see if I could figure out what the sound was. Then I saw it with my own eyes. The door handle was moving slightly, only up to the point where the lock stopped it. Then small sounds could be heard kind of inside the lock before they tried to open it again. The lock was being tampered with. They were trying to get in. As I was about to get up to tell Mark, I saw the silhouette of a man through the glass pane on the side of the door. You know those thick ones that refract light so you can't really see through them clearly? He seemed to press his face against it to look inside, so I kicked Mark, who was asleep on the other side of the couch, and signaled him to be quiet. Then I pointed towards the door. Mark's face froze in shock. The man moved back to the door and I whispered, "We have to get upstairs and call someone now." We slowly snuck upstairs, and then the most terrifying sound I could imagine happening in that moment filled my chest with fear. The door opened, so we moved faster, still trying to be quiet. We went to the end of the hall to his father's room and locked the door. He used the house phone to call the police and tried telling them what's going on. We could hear rummaging through the house, then the sounds of a few of the stairs creaking under the weight, the subtle footsteps, the floorboards creaking, doors being pulled. It all raised my anxiety for the moment he would... Shit, he found us. By this time we already told the police what happened, and they said someone would be there in about 5 minutes or less, but I couldn't handle the waiting. Then he started trying to knock the door off its hinges. I broke down and started crying on the floor. Was this going to be it? The door flew open and it revealed a tall, heavy-set man in all black with a gun pointed directly to us. I saw the barrel of the weapon and my entire life flashed before my eyes. I have never been this horrified in my entire life. Just as he took a step towards us, we heard the sirens. The guy turned and ran all the way into nearby trees after exchanging fire with the police. He was never caught, and we never saw him again. With any luck, we never will. His father came home and had to tell my mom about it after. I wasn't allowed to go over there for a while until his father upped his security. Now, his house looks like a fortress. One night, my girls and I went out clubbing. We weren't really looking for any guys. We just wanted to go out looking good and feeling ourselves. We were buying our own drinks, dancing on each other, and just trying to have an overall good vibe. We even rented out a booth for ourselves, just to give us some separation from the rest of the crowd, because we really just wanted to vibe together. That was until this creep came up to our booth and asked to buy us drinks. We usually don't mind the asking, because we get that it's going to happen when we go out. We politely declined and said thanks anyway. He was a decent looking guy and it was nothing against him. We just didn't want to that night. The guy went silent and just stood there staring at us. Alicia asked if there was something else, then he just went off, calling us skanks and sluts, saying that he didn't want any of us anyway. Alicia stood up and asked what the hell was his problem. Who the hell did he think he was talking to? All we said was no thank you. We even smiled and said thanks anyway. The man got louder, spewing threats and stumbling over himself. Clearly, this guy was either hammered or tweaked out of his mind. At one point, he even grabbed Alicia, and she had to fight him off. Some of the guys in the club started dragging him off. They were telling him to chill because he was doing way too much. Eventually, the security had to escort him out of the club. because he was making everybody else uncomfortable. Before he left, he shouted, "I'll be seeing you later." Despite the goofy guy, we went back to trying to enjoy our night, at least for the few hours we had left. We also got free bottle service to make up for the creepy ass guy. We were about to leave, and some guys asked if they could escort us to our car. They said they didn't want anything, just to make sure that we were safe, because unstable guys like that were always unpredictable. We agreed since it wasn't that long a walk anyway. They escorted us. We said thanks, and that was it. Alicia and I were faded by that point, so we slept in the back for most of the way home. We stumbled back into her house, and I just slept over the night, so Carmen, our designated driver, didn't have to make the extra trip since I lived the farthest. I woke up kind of groggy in the middle of the night because I needed to pee. As I was about to get up, I saw a figure at the end of the couch, and before I could even process anything, they jumped on top of me. I laid there with my heart pounding out of my chest. Someone was on top of me with their hands over my mouth, and a cold piece of steel pressed against my temple. I woke up properly and recognized him. It was the same man from the club. He stunk of liquor, cheap cologne, body odor. I wanted to scream, but he told me not to make a sound and took the safety off his gun. I felt like my heart was about to explode. I couldn't breathe properly with his weight on my chest and his cologne stifling me. He just kept saying bitches like me are ungrateful, with this deranged look on his face. I could feel the tears running down my cheek as he tried to pry my legs apart. I felt so helpless against this psycho. Then I saw Alicia behind him. She pulled back and swung the metal bat against his skull. He groaned in pain as she grabbed me and told me to get upstairs now. We ran upstairs as the sound of shots fired rung through the house. I couldn't even process anything. I was still in complete shock. We barricaded ourselves in the bathroom, and then we realized neither of us had our phones. He shot through the door and we jumped into the bathtub. Between the sounds of his shouting, Alicia crying, and him trying to keep the door in, I couldn't even think. I just sat there with a frozen look on my face for what felt like hours. I was never so sure that I was about to die as in that moment. Then I heard a voice that I was sure I heard before, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. Not in the middle of all that confusion. He said, "No sudden movements. Put the gun down slowly." Then 2 shots were heard. The voice said it's okay to come out now. I hesitated, but I pulled the door and saw one of the guys that escorted us from the club. Apparently, the majority of them were ex-Marines and saw the guy tracking us from the club, so they followed him just to make sure we were safe. Originally, they just wanted to call the police and have them take care of it, but when the guy was sneaking around and went as far as to break into the house, they couldn't risk waiting for that long. This was so terrifying. A man tracked us all the way home, broke into our house, and threatened to kill us just because we said we didn't want him to buy us any drinks. The guy who we saw first, Josh, and his friend held him down until the police arrived and took our statements. This happened about 2 years ago, but even now I still have nightmares, and sometimes I can still see him or even smell his horrible cologne. When I was younger, I had a friend named Kyle. We would always hang out at his house in his basement. No one else in his family really used it, so we could kind of customize it to be our own little man cave. We even saved up and put a little mini fridge in there. Growing up, I spent a lot of time over there and have some great memories, but they're all kind of shadowed by this one. This is the last night I ever spent over Kyle's basement. We were the only ones there because everyone else had stuff to do either with family or school. We were playing this new game his auntie got him. It was one of those scare type games where there were a lot of jump scares, puzzles, monsters, and you're walking around in the dark a lot. We reached a level we couldn't beat and it was getting pretty late. We came down off our sugar high and started getting tired, so we went to bed. I was awoken late in the night by what I can only describe as loud whispering. When I opened my eyes, I saw what I was sure was a person standing in the far corner of the room, staring at me and whispering. She stepped forward. She was dressed in a long black nightgown, but it was ripped and dirty. Periodically, she did this strange twitch where she threw her head to one side with her mouth wide open and staring directly at me with this horrible groan. She looked like she was in pain when she did it, but just couldn't help. One side of her face drooped and sagged whenever she did it. She moved closer, and the whispers got louder as she threw her head back repeatedly. I almost thought it was going to snap right off. Then she stopped inches away from me with a sick grin. She touched my face. Her hands were cold as ice. I shut my eyes really tight, and when I opened them, she was gone. No weird lady, no whispering, no shadows, nothing. I tried to pass it off as a dream. The next morning, Kyle got a call that his auntie died from a stroke around 2 a.m. that morning. Was it related? I don't know. Is it a weird coincidence? Definitely. I was never able to tell Kyle this because it still sounds crazy to me, even as I write this. Ever since then, their whole house has an ominous feeling to me. I can't even handle the thought of going over there. One time I was driving past there with my mom, and I could have sworn I saw that same lady in the windows, in the same position with her head tilted back, staring directly at me, watching the car drive past. I just ignored it and tried to stay as calm as possible, even when my mom asked what was wrong. Kyle and I are still friends. I just don't go over to his house anymore. I can't. Hopefully one day, I can just tell him.